everybody. Welcome back to Behind the Joystick. I'm your host today, and I have here with me Chase. How are you today?
I am doing phenomenal, Courtney. How are you?
I'm good. I did get a little confused on Twitter. Are you Rid? Are you Chase? Are you? You're a little
Yeah,
bit of everybody.
RID is short for Run It Down. It's part of the grassroots esports 501c3 that I'm a part of that just runs grassroots esports events.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I
Yeah.
guess for people who don't really know who you are, I guess tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh Lord. I'm a jack of all trades and a master of few. I'm Chase Newcomb, also known as Nuke or Nuclear. Yes, that is my real name. No, I will not be naming my son Duke. Thank you for asking. Um, and I have been in the scholastic esports space, specifically in collegiate, since I was an undergrad student in 2014 at Ball State University. And then from 2018 to 2019, I was the director of a virtual reality and esports land center out of Davenport, Iowa, named Paradigm. And then 2019 to about early 2023, I was at St. Cloud State as the director of esports. Or sorry, then I was at St. Ambrose University as the head coach of esports, then director of esports. 2023 to 2024 ish, I was at St. Cloud State as the director, and now I am at Shenandoah University. I just started there as a professor for esports practice. So I am thrilled to be here, thrilled to chat about my journey a little bit.
That's awesome. So you have worn very many hats. How did you first get involved into like the esports space? What was like the journey for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up as a disenfranchised student. My family made less than $15,000 a year. My dad, for most of my late middle school into high school into adult life, wasn't unfortunately able to be around. He suffered from the drug disease that we see in
Oh,
Indiana, the epidemic. So my mom took care of us, but I was a sophomore in high school when my mom developed breast cancer. So for a
oh,
few years there, we were homeless. We were living with other people. I was kind of part of that demographic, that small statistic that you see. I didn't grow up in a very big city. I grew up in a small town. We couldn't even get soccer started at our high school, so
oh
let alone
man.
esports. Esports was not in the picture. So I was very fortunate. My mom made sure I kept a good head on my shoulders, even throughout our hardships. And she's been my role model my whole life. She ended up beating breast cancer in stage two, right around my graduation in 2014, and was on a very, very long recovery journey from there. And she's since now doing much better. For anyone that was wondering, yes, she is working now and very much enjoys her job. She likes to pay it forward, so she's currently working at CVS. But
That's
um,
awesome.
kind of going into that journey, that was crazy for me because we couldn't afford internet growing up. When I stayed with friends, we played Halo Online, and I played in a Call of Duty online gaming community through
Yeah.
playing at other friends' houses, but didn't really have it at my own house. Wasn't really introduced to it. So it wasn't until 2014 when we were living with friends of the family that my brother, I call my brother Kyle, was my best man at my wedding just last month, which was awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He helped me build a PC. And so when we built the PC, we were playing a game at the time that was in beta. It had just come out of alpha called Smite. And so that was my intro into esports was Smite, which is
That's awesome.
like League of Legends. So we went to the launch tournament in 2014, and it was there I met Todd Harris, who is now working with Skillshot Media. And I asked Todd. I walked right up to him. You know, the ratio of pro players, talent, professionals who worked for high res to just your average Joe schmoes at the event was probably like 3 to 1. There was a lot more people working the event than people attending because it was a smaller game at the time. But I walked
Mm.
right up to him and I asked him, I want to do this as a career. This is my first event. I can see this as an experience. This is crazy. I've never been a part of anything like this. How do I get involved? And he said, well, are you in high school or college? I said, I'm in high school, but I'm going into college next year. He said, does your college have any sports program? I said, I don't know. He said, build it. Just do it. Get involved. That is your first step into this journey because you don't know what the path is going to look like unless if you take that first step. So I took that advice to heart. when I got to Ball State, it was a big culture shock. I come from a small town of like 1,500 people. Shout out Cambridge City, Indiana. And Ball State was a campus of 22,000 students. So the first
Man,
semester was a lot of a culture shock. But after the first semester, I started Cardinal Esports at Ball State. And I ran
nice.
that from 2015 to 2018. And when I graduated in 2018, the year after, it got varsity status and became Ball State Esports. So very proud of what we were able to build there. But that was my journey. That was sort of the start. It was a very unconventional lead into the community.
Right. And now you're with Shenandoah University
Yeah.
Esports, and you're currently like a professor there, which is,
Yeah.
a pretty fun title.
Yeah.
What's your day-to-day there? What are you like juggling in the esports side?
Yeah. It's very, very different than my former day to days. So for years, I want to say from college up until this past summer, I was heavily working gigs. So I was working probably 6 to 8 esports events a year. So one every other month. And, on top of that, coaching, directing, I was part of that statistic working 60 to 80 hours a week, depending on the week.
Man,
Now that is not the case. Now I'm working a lot less as a professor. That was part of the goal of moving here to Winchester, Virginia, so that we could have that experience, and finally pay it forward. I've also as well believed heavily that you need to be the change that you want to see. And so I'm outspoken about it, and sometimes it gets me in trouble. But I believe our current education system can be failing for a lot of students. It doesn't meet students on their level, and students just look to get a piece of paper out of it, and it's a very, very, very expensive piece of paper. So
yeah,
I'm very much experiential learning oriented. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. I've always had a solid mentor and mentorship background. I just got my master's in organizational leadership in 20. I graduated in early 2023, and that was a couple year long journey. And so I try to implement that into all pieces of what I'm doing to try to grow an organization, grow a community. That's where my heart is with the community of esports, no matter what community it is. And so I very much wanted to pay that forward. And so like our class this semester, we have an experiential learning oriented esports event management class. And that event management class, their midterm is running an online event that is a qualifier, and their final is to run an in-person finals from that qualifier. And I really encourage them to go above and beyond. They were actually able to partner with Generation Esports, the parent company of the High School Esports League, and they've gotten a partnership with the High School Esports League for the event. And they'll actually be running the finals in about 12 days on November 16th. So we're super
nice.
excited about that. I'm doing that, and then I'm teaching our 101 classes, which is more introduction to esports, but I have a business background. My undergraduate degree was in business management, and like I said, my master's was in organizational leadership, which is kind of like the psychology and person to person side of the MBA. An MBA, Master's of Business Administration, is a lot more numbers oriented and accounting oriented. And I'll
Mhm.
leave that to the people who are really good at that stuff. I
Right.
prefer talking and interacting with people. So I've always had that background. So the business side of it, I really try to incorporate because it's very, very important. You know how to network, you know how to talk to people, you know how to communicate in esports. So my 101 class, that is what they're doing. I've integrated some foundations of business in there, and they have 3 papers they have to do in the semester. I've reworked it so that they have to interview esports professionals, people who have worked in the industry, and then write a 1-page paper from those interviews about what they learned about the position, about the job, insight from the person. And so it's kind of leading up to their final for the class will be them interviewing the seniors and juniors at Shenandoah and doing a feature on them, like a magazine feature. And we'll be pulling all of those features together and creating a magazine to highlight the achievements of all of our juniors and seniors at Shenandoah going through the esports track. So it's a way to integrate freshmen with seniors, create that camaraderie, establish that culture, which is so
Right.
vital and important in growing an esports community. on top of that, it shows them the basis of networking, talking with people, getting out there, not just writing papers, but getting to know the person behind the paper.
Right. And it's kind of a cool thing that you're showing like seniors and like the freshmen to kind of conjoin together, cuz you're pretty much pushing like the next generation of people in the space who are probably too nervous or too scared, and then they see the bigger guys and they're like, we've already been through this, like it's cool, like take my hand and let's run. But
Well,
now the
that and
next.
when they get to their senior year, now
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, okay, I did this as a freshman. I get it." And they're gonna be a lot more open to doing those interviews and whatnot because they were the ones that was interviewing their peers just a year or two ago.
Right. And the cool thing is too is you've also mentioned networking, and networking's also has brought you to the honeypot and the NACE
Yep.
esports involvement that you've had,
Mhm.
especially you're also an executive officer at honeypot. How did you get into that role?
Yeah, so we started Honeypot. Honeypot is the largest tournament series in Iowa history, and it was one of those cool things where we set the bar and then we beat that bar. So I mentioned earlier I was a facility director at Paradigm, which was a virtual reality and esports center in Iowa. We ran a tournament in 2019 called Paradigm Shift. And
Mhm.
Paradigm Shift was a $10,000 pot bonus event. We had 360 folks come out and compete. We had some massive stars in the Super Smash Brothers space come out at the time and compete for the event, as well as commentary talent that came out. So it was a phenomenal event. Well, after the event, I switched positions. I moved into St. Ambrose, and at St. Ambrose, we were one of the first schools in the country to start a fighting games team and not just rep Super Smash Brothers players, but represent Tekken and Dragon Ball Fighters and Street Fighter as well within our program as varsity
That's
scholarship
awesome.
students. So I've always been an advocate for the fighting game space in collegiate and integrating that, which is why now I'm in CFGC, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. More specifically on Honeypot, we set out to beat our record at Paradigm Shift. And
Mhm.
so we scheduled the first event for March 2020.
Oh, fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the
that
best time to do it.
that ended up not working out, and so we pushed the event back due to the unforeseen circumstances of COVID to 2021, and we had the first honeypot tournament. And it wasn't until I think the third honeypot, it was a biannual event for the first 5 iterations of the event. It wasn't until the third honeypot that we beat the paradigm shift numbers and we hit above 360 folks. Well, then the
That's
fourth
awesome.
honeypot, we hit above that. The fifth honeypot, we hit above that. And just at the sixth honeypot, in fact, I should know this number off the top of my head, but I got to pull it up now. We hit well over 432 attendees at Honeypot 6. So it's the largest tournament in Iowa history, both endemic to Smash and not Smash, just esports period. It's the largest esports tournament. So we started it. We pulled a team of grassroots organizers together. We started integrating collegiate components, adding crew battles, and so yeah, we're hoping to have some announcements out very soon on upcoming honeypot events. We took about a year hiatus. We had some shift up in our organization, and things shook up a little bit, so we had
Yeah.
to kind of wait for our next iteration. But we got some big news coming up, so that's how I got involved with honeypot and with NACE. You bring up NACE. NACE is interesting. The National Association of Collegiate Esports. I actually joined NACE as an ACE hater. I did not like NACE.
Really?
And the reason why I didn't like NACE is I was a student leader at Ball State from 2015 to 2018, 2014 to
Mhm.
2018. And I wasn't allowed to join NACE because we weren't a varsity program. I didn't know what any of that meant at the time. I just knew that we were super competitive. We had over 8 teams, over 200 students in a club program. It was massive for its time. And we were just a little jaded by it. We were like, why can't we join and compete with the big dogs? We're showing
Right.
that we have the competition. But NACE is for varsity sports. It's not at the time. It wasn't specifically for club programs. It was a membership driven organization, and honestly, it costed a lot of money. Even if they would have let us in, I don't know if we would have been able to foot the bill at the time for it. So
Right.
I joined NACE at St. Ambrose with the goal of one, better understanding what it was, and then two, trying to serve that organization to have a better representation in the collegiate space. And so I joined as a competition council just member. Well, first I joined just as a regular director, and within my first semester, I was voted onto the competition council in 2020. And so I
That's
served
awesome.
throughout 2020. It was in 2023, our chair, Adam Antor, had also moved to be a professor as well at Ferris State. And so the position opened up for me to become the chair because I was chair elect at the time. So I
Mhm.
was chair for the last year or so. But it was a very, very interesting time because while I was also on the competition council, I was chair of the advisory board for NECC. So there was a lot of
Oh, really?
I have to keep my lips shut over here and not say anything over here, and I have to focus. It was a lot of like dividing my mental across the two and trying to make NECC the best it could, fastest growing organization oriented around club and student involvement, and cater for the NACE membership and grow that varsity program and redefine what it means to be a varsity program. So
For
that was
sure.
a very, very interesting time, but I loved my experience serving in both of those capacities. I'm still on the competition council, but now I'm an advisor. I've taken a step back. I don't have a
Mhm.
voting role, and my former student, who's now my boss, Alyssa Duran, is the competition council chair elect, and she's serving with my former chair elect, who's now the chair, Chris Funston, with St. Clair.
Nice. See, look, talking through these podcasts, someone at least has an involvement with the NECC or the NACE, and it's nice to hear that there's these programs that provide that for the like collegiate space, but it's also like it's great to hear that they butt heads a little bit, and I love competition. It's like my favorite thing.
I like using the term co-opetition. Sometimes
Yeah.
they make it more competitive than it needs to be. I'm a big believer of a rising tide raises all ships. So I'm just a go-getter, very community oriented. I don't really care about the semantics behind it.
Right. And did you feel like you had to be like a secret agent and be like, I can't show my identity here or here. I'm only for NACE or I'm only for NECC.
No, not
That's
until
good.
I became the chair of the competition council, and that's when I sort of left NECC. It was right when we restructured the organization. We actually implemented our Julian Thomas, who was my former coach at the time, and he was a graduate assistant with me in our masters. For our sort of final project in our masters, we had to do some strategic planning for an organization. So we rehauled all of NECC through a strategic planning process back in um, summer 2022. And that was a process in and of itself. But kind of at the end of that process, I felt like, okay, it's time to hang up the cape. I've been involved with NECC. I was one of the first 10 schools involved. I've been doing it since 2019. I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in term limits, and my term would be coming up. So I'm going to sort of George Washington and set the example and show people that, hey, we got to rotate out and get new leadership in. And I have nothing but love for both of those groups, both NECC and NACE. But at the
Yeah.
time, I was like, there was a lot of tension, and I said, it's probably best if I just serve and give my all in the competition council as the chair, and pretty much dropped everything else to do that for the last year and a half or so, and really focused my efforts on that.
That's awesome. And then so now you continued your advisory boards with CFGC and
Yep,
NACAD, right? Or is it
yep.
NAECAD?
No, it's NACAD. Oh God,
NACAD. Okay.
NAECAD would be such a
It was so
mouthful.
long.
Yeah, no, it's CFGC and NACAD. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
Well, what do you like, I guess, do over there in the direction of the organization?
Yeah, so part of me moving into this new job was sort of showing a new light of my life. I've always been a believer of focus on your strengths, but apply your strengths to your areas of weakness to
Mm,
better understand your weaknesses. So a big weakness of mine used to be writing, and I got much better at writing. I studied journalism at Ball State for a year and put out some articles and did a podcast for a short while. So I felt like my writing really improved. But at this point in my career, I really want to get into research for esports. But
Yeah.
specifically endemic research. We have a lot of folks researching in esports, and I want to say this is no slight to these folks at all, but they come from a non-endemic background, right? Maybe they come from sports management or they come from psychology. They don't really come from esports, and we're now in this phase, this generation of esports, this third generation or so, where we're starting to see people come from esports, from developed programs, apply what they're learning in an esports sense. So I
Mhm.
really want to work with. We actually just created a group on Discord this past week. Shout out to Kyberts, Tom Screech for pulling that together. But we're trying to lead a group of researchers to have some endemic esports research in the space. So that was part of the move here to Shenandoah. I'm also looking to start a family soon, and I can't work 60, 70 hours a week with a kid
Right.
at home. That's just not feasible. So um I applied here, and I was grateful enough to get the job, and I'm so thankful I'm working with some of my closest friends in the esports space that were my former students. My director, Alyssa, was my former student. My peer, who's the competition coordinator at Shenandoah, Fernando Preciado, he's one of my former students. And then, working with Xander Merle Smith and Ian Burnett, both on the production and teaching side of things. I've known them through the space. We have friends of friends in the space. So it's just been so heartwarming to move here. I'm going to tear up talking about it, but it
Yeah.
was if it wasn't for that opportunity, I would not be involved with CFGC or NACAD to the capacity that I'm at. But I
Right.
moved, and because of that, it opened up my capacity to do more. So I joined CFGC, which stands for the Collegiate Fighting Games Community, not conference, but it is a community meant to provide opportunity for people that want to compete in fighting games, but isn't being offered on the collegiate level. Um, and so what's interesting about that is I've been on the back end of CFGC for a while. One of
Mhm.
the founders, Dr. Curtis Holman, was one of my peers at St. Cloud State, and I think nothing but the world of Dr. Holman. And then Jason is, funny enough, from my area of Indiana. He oversees all of the IU East sports programs, and so that's like right in my neck of the woods. I met Jason a few years ago, so we kind of have that Hoosier background. We've been able to talk on that. And then
Yeah.
one of the people who kickstarted it was Albert. And what not a lot of people know this story, but Albert, and people don't know this either, he's one of my former students as well. He also came from St. Ambrose University. And he was competing and trying to play in online Tekken tournaments at the time. Well, we were in Iowa, and he wasn't able to play in any East Coast events or any West Coast events because they both claimed that the other side of the country had claimed Iowa. So he was in this dead zone during COVID
Really?
and unable to compete in any of his fighting games. So he switched over to Smash so that he had an opportunity to be able to compete. But I remember
Right.
him telling me when he wasn't able to, he's like, "Screw it, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to start my own fighting games conference or community and collegiate, and I'm going to make it happen." And I told him, I was like, "Do it." And here we are, 4 years later, and the Mad Lad has done it with his peers. So
Oh, I
I'm
believe
a
it.
big believer in giving back, and I've written enough documentation in all of the organizations I'm a part of. So that's currently what I'm helping with CFGC. I'm helping on their documentation and their processes to make it sort of smoother.
Mhm.
Every other week, if anyone's in that Discord, they'll see that Albert's putting out an announcement or an update on a change in the check-in process or a change in the registration process. So, tracking all those changes and then condensing it, making it more efficient for players to get involved and just an easier user experience. That's really what I'm focused on right now with CFGC, but that may change. Shout out to Jackie Lamb. I'm working with Jackie Lamb on that, and she's just
Right.
an absolute sunshine of a person. She's awesome. So that's CFGC, and then NACAD stands for the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors, which I was a firm believer in when they started in 2018, 2019. I'd take my part-time coaches, which were, funny enough, Alyssa, Fernando, Albert, Chase DeWitt, Julian Thomas. I'd take them all out to the NACAD events and
Mhm.
front the bill to go back in 2018, 2019, because I felt so important that they could networked with other colleges and universities in the space. They made a name for themselves. And, I told them they're part time coaches. A lot of colleges don't allow their coaches to coach for other colleges. Some do. But I told him, like, network, get involved, coach for other schools. It's so important that you make a career out of this if you want to, and you're not going to do it just working part time for me. So
Right.
really tried to pay that forward and help get them connected. So I believed in NACAD very early on. And I've always gone to their annual conferences, their big regional or their big clinics, their national clinics, but they host regional clinics as well. So um, I applied to be on the advisory board for NACAD and was accepted graciously enough. And so right now we're currently doing a series, and they restructured the advisory board a bit. So the advisors are kind of more front end industry subject matter experts.
Mhm.
So I'm currently leading a peer group around community building and getting involved with your local community. And we actually just talked a couple weeks ago on local partnerships and how to, bolster your event and your program through partnering locally with your downtown partnerships and your visitors bureaus, your hotels, your restaurants, etc. And we've really dived deep into that. Shout out to Brad Blanchard, who is one of the GAs at Shenandoah, and he worked with me on that project for the first month. We should have a new face in the second month, but that's been an extraordinary experience to kind of see behind that curtain as well and be involved and help develop coaches and directors in the space.
That's awesome. And that pretty much, where was it? Would you say that that would be one of your like key lessons, or what you're like helping others learn in their experience? How would you like prepare them for their roles, other than networking, being involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's so adaptive. It's hard. That's like not a technical solution. There's not a one size fits all. But I will say, like, what really made me want to leave the private sector, coming from that land center experience,
Mhm.
is the community and coachable moments. Growing up, I had some really great coaches and I had some really awful coaches that I worked underneath. And I believe in teachable moments. And it's one of those things where I tell my students all the time. I've been saying it for years now. I'm sure that if any of my students are watching this, they can probably repeat along with me. But I can lead a horse to water. I can't make it drink. I will
Right.
put as much work and effort into you as you put into yourself. And so if you don't take yourself seriously, I don't know how you expect me to take you seriously. But if you take yourself seriously, you really want to make a career out of this, or you really want to apply yourself to what you're doing, I'll work with you and we'll make it happen. So that's my biggest, I guess, advice to anyone looking to get not just into esports. We talk about esports but all the time, but I think it's applicable anywhere. Get involved, do it.
Mhm.
Really build that resume, build that experience, get out there. I think that it's so important to give back and show that you care more about the community and the people behind it than the position and the status.
For sure. And especially in the future of esports, looking from it, back in 2018 to now, what would you say would be like the next 5 years?
Oh gosh, that's tough. What's the next 5 years in esports? Well, we'll say, since it's the end of 2024, we'll say like five and a half, six, because
For
we'll
sure.
be in 2030 here soon, which is scary to think about.
So weird.
So odd. So, what is the next 5 years like? Well, that that's a difficult question. I think that the esports space, a lot of people compare collegiate with the professional space.
Mhm.
And there are certainly some lessons to learn and things to learn, but collegiate has proven at this point that it is a viable replacement for the T2 model and what was previously T2, or a viable contender with the T2 model. Tier 2 being like the semi professional step into the esports space.
Right.
So we're seeing like a lot of professional players get involved in collegiate teams, and we're seeing a lot of collegiate players, some collegiate players, I guess I should say, going into the professional space. Schools like Maryville and St. Clair and Fisher have pro players on their teams that are competing. And that's crazy to think about. So I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more of that. I think that we'll see a lot more of esports getting involved in the education space. I think in the last year, we've seen the bubble pop and the traditional esports space. So we're going to see a lot of folks turn to collegiate and see the success from collegiate and academic esports at large, not just the collegiate side, but I think high school is also a massive growing factor. And we're kind of seeing that sports pipeline that we saw, in the early days of sports development through the 20s through the 40s. Growing from that community-based organizations, your YMCA leagues, your local leagues, into massive multi-million dollar associations and industries like the NBA and the NFL. I think we're
For
going to
sure.
start to see a rebuilding of our pipeline because we sort of started on the opposite end, right? We have the
Yes.
internet. They didn't have the internet. So we see 16-year-old players getting signed to Fortnite teams or teams, right? And so they're
Right.
making mogul moves, mogul money at that point. We're going to start to see, I think, in the next 5 years, a reinforcement of that pipeline, being the middle school, high school, even grassroots. A lot of folks focusing on the grassroots community and endemic growth within the space. Really excited to see that development. So, in the next 5 years, it'll be interesting because I'll sort of be part of the old guard at that point. And I'll
More
be
like OG esports.
I don't even know if I can claim that because there are people like Chris Postel and Dylan and um, even Doc Haskell that I would say are OGs before me, right? So what does that
Right.
make them? OOGs? I don't
MOOGs.
know. I don't know, but yeah, I certainly think at that point we'll see a fourth, a fifth generation of students coming into the industry. I also think we're going to see a lot more esports in mainstream, even more than we have in the last few years.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot of people coming from programs and working in traditional spaces. Folks like Ethan Dolan, who was at Ball State working to be a newscaster, and he was a Rocket League commentator for years. Now he works for Channel 13 News. I think we're going to see a lot more of that integration into other industries and seeing esports as a viable path to get there.
For sure. And I honestly, that's like, I guess like the purpose of this podcast too is to really learn that, there's more than just the coaches and the players, because we always hear about them and like with their challenges and stuff. But what about the camera guy? What about his day to day? What about the person who's operating or moderating the comment section just to kind of like tone it down a bit? Because they're also involved in this esports space. And without them, it's like, you're just going to have some players and no one's going to know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's a hard part of the space. I mean, it's the same. There's so many people at this point get really tired and bored, honestly, I think, comparing esports with the sports space, but it's just because it's so darn accurate, right?
It
Think of
is.
all the people that go into a sports broadcast. It's not just the players and the coaches. Heck, it's the fans, it's the cameramen, it's production, it's people in the back writing the ads. It's all of those pieces.
Yeah. It is. And especially going back to the grassroots, people are really taking acknowledgement on that, because we have the esports award. And then I've heard recently just the Scholastic Awards in the space. And it's nice to just know that, even just the littlest things that you have, even if you build a club in the school or you're listening to your coach, like there's a spot to recognize that there's people out there just like you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And those are the people that are truly the unsung heroes in a lot of ways. And honestly, even the students and the players that are on the front end, there's so much work that goes on the back end that people don't see.
Mm,
The hard practices, the tough losses, the intense VOD reviews, the team conflict. All of that is things that the public eye generally doesn't see, but those are challenges that are harder to overcome than playing in person for a finals.
for sure. Now, I we're going towards the end of this, and I ask everybody, and I want to ask you this too. What would be some advice that you would have wanted post esports, post collegiate space?
Oh, what is some advice that I would have wanted uh post esports, post collegiate space?
Yeah,
Um get
post
involved
Nukem.
post Nukem. Post Nukem. So I understand correctly. What is the advice that I would have wanted when I started, or advice that I would want to give people in like a couple of years?
What
Or when
advice?
I'm dead?
What advice would you give yourself?
What advice would I give myself?
Mm,
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Just go out there, make it happen. Talk with your really approach and talk with your idols. I think is another big one. I think for years I was so afraid of failure. I threw myself into esports. Another one I give myself and anyone else working in this industry is stay firm in your beliefs. Truly stay firm in your beliefs. If you believe that you are working harder than your football program at your small private school that is an NAIA school and your school gets like $20,000 in funding and they demand 18 students a year, like most of these private colleges,
yeah.
go out there and don't be afraid to hold your own and show your athletic director or your provost or whoever it is at your university, we're bringing in this much, we are doing this much for our program, and my day stops at 40 hours or 45 hours a week. Have that collaboration. But collaboration is a two-way street. Don't just let them tell you what to do and do it. um, really go out there and fight for what you believe in. I think that that's a something that a lot of people in the space are so scared of because they're so thankful to have a career in esports. They forget why they're doing it, and
Yeah,
most of the time it's for their family, for their friends, for themselves. And you can't help someone else until you're 100%.
for sure. That is so awesome. That's such good advice. I really appreciate you being on this and talking with me, and also thank you for letting me use the Twitter GIF that kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
popped off, and
That was so awesome. Yeah,
it was
shout out
great.
to Matthew Corfey, Septilence. I love Septilence. He's phenomenal.
Yes. And then if people want to reach out to you, or any links or plugs you want to put in, go ahead.
Yeah, I like to. I consider myself very approachable, very grassroots oriented. So even if you want to reach out to me individually, do it. Reach out to my Twitter. Reach out to heck, even my Facebook, Instagram, whatever. I have a link tree. linktr.ee/c nuclear CNUCLEAR. It's also on my Twitter. Twitter is at Chase Newcomb, ChaseNeukam.
Awesome. And I will also put everything in the show notes below so you can feel free to check him out. Awesome. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you. And we'll see you next Friday.